national meeting in San Antonio. Oh, it's only 12:04. For the beginning of October, and there were like 125 people there, from 10 different states, 31 different cities and counties. We
That's
had
great.
like 10 different cities or counties represented from California. So it was pretty cool. And for me, what I learned from it, sort of overriding lesson from it all, it was all people who feel like they're part of the movement to create local dedicated funding. 2/3 of the people were, teams sort of figuring out what they want to do. And what I realized too, there were a bunch of people who were there as faculty and panel people who had already done it. So everybody feels like once you do it, or, and then you want to do more, but you feel like you're part of the movement to get this done, whether you got something passed or not, or, or just put something on the ballot. So that was exciting. And it was exciting to be in the same room with all these people, so there is something about being together in person. So for sure, we're going to have a California focused funding the next generation. What's the next iteration of this effort in California? Either in October or December of next year. So whether we do it before the election will depend partly on the people who have things on the ballot, whether they feel it would be helpful to them, or whether we do it after the election in December. So just put that in your head. Before we get started with the sort of main part of this program, if that's what it is, meeting, about sort of what you do in the next year, if you are planning for 2026, even if you're planning for 2024, but everybody, almost everyone involved in this meeting is 2026. But sort of what you should be planning to do over the next 6 months to a year, or to a year and a half. Before we do that, I was so excited when I got home and seeing everyone. I was hoping that some people would be willing to share what they learned, what they got out of it, what they thought was helpful for people who didn't come and for people who did come. So
Happy to share.
Who is that?
Oh, Ananda.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, so Ananda Sweet, day job standard as a Metro Chamber of Commerce, but from the Our Kids, Our Future Sonoma County 2024 ballot initiative. It's a 1/4-cent sales tax countywide that'll generate $30 million a year, directed to young kids. So I think my main takeaways, one, it really is that, like, really getting to see concretely that you're part of this larger movement, from the intro where you could see all the dots on the map, and then just feeling that in the room with so many different communities, I think was really powerful for us. And even as a group, we've decided to go. So we didn't need that level of inspiration, but it really was meaningful. We didn't need it in that way, in that we had already chosen to go, but it really was powerful to feel that. It was also fantastic to have experts like Nicole Derse in the room, who were just so willing to share their time, and not just for their presentations, but just to feel really accessible. Nicole, I see Nicole here, so it really felt like you were part of the group too, and not sort of this stand away expert who was there to just do your presentation. It really felt like you were there and engaged with us, and eager and willing to share your expertise, and also just a part of this movement with all of us. And then I think just more broadly too, that just piece of the movement is just that critical opportunity that we're each doing this work in our own communities to sort of change hearts and minds, and to do that through the lens of, we know in our community what's going to work, what has the most bipartisan appeal, or whatever approaches we're taking. But that also, beyond our own campaigns, has a significant nationwide impact, as we're talking to our local electeds and changing their minds about investing funds in kids and families. Those are all often the pipeline for our future federal elected leaders. So that was my main thing. I just went away excited, we are part of something really big here beyond just our own little campaign.
Yeah. Anybody else have any comments, thoughts? I'm gonna call on you if you don't say something. Christina?
Yeah, no, I have to agree. It was we really just can't underestimate the impact on energy and on focus. And when you're in a room with people who are like-minded like that, and you have access to those who have done a lot of this work. And so I think that that's just so re-energizing and something to keep in front of us for people who, I mean, are all working really hard, and it's difficult to get away to these types of things, and yet how much value and how much energy it really infuses into the moment. And then it was great to hear from some of the variety of campaigns, because it does help to just reinforce that there are a lot of paths forward, that this is a lot of like this activity is a lot like water on concrete. It flows the way it flows into all the different cracks, and you just never know. And so it's great to really glean from everyone's experiences and everyone's expertise. And that's, you know, that's difficult to get from Zooms. We do the best we can on this in this platform that helps us stay connected, but it helps just to remind everyone how valuable those meetings and opportunities are.
Ivan, are you with us? Or are you, I see your name.
Hi, yes, did you say Ivan?
Yes.
Hi, how are you all?
And do you want to say what you got out of the conference?
Yes, of course. I think that for me, what I got out of the conference was just seeing how dedicated everybody was there, from the folks that had already gotten a ballot on the ballot, or that have already been successful, or for even those that weren't successful in their campaigns, and so how seeing just how committed they were to making it happen. I think that was what I got the most what inspired me the most. And also our presenters, I want to echo that our presenters were not just there to present, but they were there to engage with the audience, and they were so willing to share their expertise during during the presentations, during lunchtime, during breakfast time. It was really great to engage with everyone.
Yeah. I have a wonderful picture I'm going to put in our newsletter of Nicole and Monica from Sacramento high-fiving each other across it. It really sort of symbolized the fun of it. Anyway, so any other thoughts? I see Dan is here from the Children's Funding Project. Anything from your retrospective perspective?
Still unpacking all of it, honestly. It was really great to meet so many of you that I'm not able to connect with on a regular basis, and in part as part of the California movement. Just really awesome conversations. Like, what really impressed me was the questions we were getting, particularly on the panels that I was involved in. Like, it just showed that everybody was deeply engaged in a learning process, and that really struck me, that people weren't there just, they were engaged on a different level and really getting sort of to the heart of understanding processes that they might be outside of their comfort zone. So I thought that was really cool, and it was just a great energy with so many people there, motivated for similar things. So
Yeah. Okay, is anybody else here who is willing to say something?
I'm happy to share. I have two kind of small takeaways.
Who is talking now?
I'm Daphne Cummings in Marin County.
Oh,
Hello, good to see you.
Yeah.
I think my two biggest takeaways were that it's possible. To me, this seems like a really big, daunting task, but talking to a lot of folks, that hadn't done it before, and then they were like, okay, this is the way forward to help the most children and families. And so they did it and got measures approved and are now getting funding. So to me, it was really seeing how possible it is, and not just something that like other people do, that I could potentially do this too. And I really, really appreciated the celebration of failing forward.
Yeah.
I just absolutely loved that even those failures were celebrated, because it means that you are able to learn really deeply and then adapt and change. And then, you know, we saw several groups that, you know, had, I mean, I think most of the groups had several attempts until they finally made something happen. So that was just, I loved the celebration of that spirit.
Yeah.
Thank
So, am I missing anyone who's willing to speak? So we have San Diego on listen mode. Okay, so
See Michelle, Margaret.
yeah.
Hi. Hi, Margaret. It's Michelle from First Five Marin.
Oh, hi.
Hi there. I just wanted to add to what Daphne said. So I had been involved in Marin Kids, which worked on the Marin Strong Start initiative years ago. And we had enormous support and a lot of effort going forward on the 2014 ballot. And there was another, at the time, there was another measure that was also on the ballot, a county measure. And some survey showed that if both were on, the county measure would fail. And it was important to the supervisors. So we had to push back to 2016. And that put us on the Hillary Trump ballot. And I think right before the election, the attention got focused, including donations, got focused so much away. But we were so close. We lost by 2,500 votes. And I wasn't involved in the decision, but no one tried a second time. And I think those votes were retrievable. And Marin is smaller. So at the time, there was an estimate that we would make $12 million a year. And we would have had over $75 million by now for children. And it's just heartbreaking. So I'm with Daphne and ready to get a new group together that will try again.
And Michelle has a very interesting idea, which I think our movement should think about, which is that we have two ends or two ages of the caring system. We need care for young people and we need care for seniors. So given that
Yes.
Marin specifically has more seniors than kids, that a ballot measure that combines those things and
Yes.
support salaries for people.
That's such a good point, especially if you think of a lot of times when there are tax measures or other fundraising measures on the ballot, a lot of times there's a request to have a senior exemption. Well, that would take away all of our votes in Marin. So yes, you're right. We definitely need something that would be attractive to seniors, because especially for the ones that are low or even middle income, it might be hard for them to feel cheerful about a funding measure for children when they're having their own, financial challenges.
Okay, and anybody else? I see that it's 2 pages, so I have to look at both. So anybody?
Margaret, can I just add one more thing, Ananda, again from Sonoma County, that I feel like I should have said? And that is that, so, I mean, honestly, when I saw the dates and we were wrapping up signature gathering, we're about to launch into a robust campaign. So there was a part of me that was like, oh gosh, can I take a week and go do this thing? And I do have to say that our team, like the other piece that we didn't even think about, the value of having our team together for that chunk of time there, like beyond sort of the learnings and just being immersed in that discussion, was really like beyond the days themselves, like talking through it at dinner was really valuable. And it just wasn't time we would have taken. So for those of you in 2026 that might be thinking of doing this next year, I would put in a plug that it really is worth having that dedicated time just to get out of your community with your little team and work through some things.
Good point. Okay, am I missing anybody else? Just speak up, unmute yourself. Okay, so I think you get a flavor for what people got out of it. Okay, we will now start the second part of this this meeting, which we promised you we would be talking about what you can do now, and you can evaluate whether we're talking now over the next 6 months or over the next year or over the next year and a half, if you are thinking about 2026. And I do want to say, by, just sort of way of introduction to this, 2026 may seem very far away. It is not far away at all. And one of the issues that we've had with this whole thing is, by the time people sort of got, hey, I could do this, I want to do it, it's too late, so that it takes longer than we initially were telling people, that we initially realized, to sort of get up and gearing and ready for this, because frankly, it's for those of us who have cared a lot about taking care of kids or youth or changing the justice system, we have to be prepared for a new type of work. I mean, a lot of us live in a bubble. A lot of us talk in jargon. A lot of us see the same people over and over. And a lot of us, if you were to do a power map, and one of the things that I want to suggest is that people do a power map. And if you don't know what a power map is, you can Google it, and I will send out links, but it's basically a way to figure out who are your best friends, who are your worst enemies, and who's got power and who doesn't. If you were to do a power map, most of the people that people on this screen connect with every day have a huge amount of caring about this, but are not high on the power map part of this. So part of what we're doing over the next 6 months, year and a half, is building our power and building our capacity to relate to a much broader, different kind of people. So that we can win elections. So, and I do want to say, we're going to throw out a lot of ideas here, but it's up to everyone to sort of, there's no linear path. There's no like, do this and then do this. It's sort of like, you're going to hear a lot of ideas and pick things that, at least to start with, that you can do, that don't feel like so much of a stretch that you sort of go, put it off and put it off and put it off. So I want to encourage people to sort of figure out in what order to do things, and to feel like that can work out. And I want to say one last thing by way of introduction, which is, given that we're entering a world that a lot of people aren't used to entering, the political world, the broader world, how do you appeal to the public? It's not too early to start thinking about how you might want to restructure your organization just a little bit. Have you ever taken clients to your city council or your board of supervisors, or do you have any idea how to do that? And wow, it's great practice. So how the people that you aspire to help, how it's sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is help them get involved in the fight for justice. So you may think about, who do you want to have on your board, or if you're an organization sort of moving forward, or a commission, like who is interested in sort of the political world, and and has connections to the media, or has connections to money. It's not too early to start thinking, how am I going to restructure this, or maybe give somebody job half-time doing communications and outreach and organizing. So as we talk through these ideas, thinking about what kind of ways you might structure your organization to get some of this work done. So now I am going to turn this over to my wonderful colleague Nicole Derse, who was there for the whole time. It was very moving to me, and she and our pollster friend Dave Metz, we're just there with us, part of the movement. It's like they're not consultants, they're part of this. So that is just Wonderful. So Nicole, you know how to share your screen, right?
I will. Thank you so much, Margaret. And for those of you that haven't celebrated yet, I want a big happy birthday to Margaret, who recently had a big birthday,
Thank you.
and is just leading this movement so well. Very excited to be with all of you. And honestly, it was really great for me to be in San Antonio. I think sometimes political consultants, it's like we get in this zone of just, the intensity of competitive races and Democrat versus Republican, and it can be exhausting. And I think like it really filled up my cup to be with all of you who are doing such amazing work, and just really prioritizing children and youth in your communities, and to feel like I had a little bit to offer in terms of thinking about campaigns and how it can be useful is only like an absolute like gift and treat for me. So just thank you all so much for what you're doing, and your willingness to kind of step in to this world and to fight at the ballot, where you can make massive impact that's going to last a long time. So I'm very excited. So I will share my screen. Just give me a second. Set up. Okay. Now, can you guys see all this in slideshow?
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes.
All right. So we've got a good amount of time. We've got, an hour for the rest of this meeting. We may not go that long, but we absolutely can. And so what I want to encourage folks to do is to chime in. If you have questions, go ahead and please ask. I can't really see the chat, and I'm not really a fan of like presenting and responding in the chat. It's a little hard with just me. So just speak up, okay? If you have any questions, anything, you don't need to raise your hand, just jump in and ask, or any comments too, because so many of you have really gone through this, and this is really an opportunity for us to have a lot of a dialogue. So I'm not going to just talk at everyone for an hour. This is a real conversation. And sort of what Margaret was saying, we're kind of looking at 2026 as the lens for this discussion. Like, what can you do now to get ready for 2026? You may not know for sure if you're going to go in 2026, but let's say you're pretty serious about it. The election is almost exactly 3 years from now. But that means that, you need to be absolutely decided, and probably a year and a half from now. And so what can you do in the next year and a half or so to really set yourself up to be ready to go in 2026 as a possibility? So that's going to be our focus today. All right, so just to sort of step back, when people think about campaigns, they often just think about the time period when you're actually talking to voters, right? And that's really only usually about 2 months before the election date. So in a November election, usually we're talking about post-Labor Day. It's such a small period of an actual campaign and an actual movement. And so much of the work that needs to get done happens in the years before, the months before. So I just want to give you a little bit of context. That sort of get out the vote phase is really a tiny piece of this. So much goes into making that successful and to getting to a place where Labor Day of the election year comes around and you're absolutely ready to go. So we ramp up once we decide we're running, and maybe we decide we're definitely going forward a year in advance. But we're going to focus today on that pre-campaign phase. What happens in the time period before you launch a campaign and before you even decide this is what we're definitely doing? This is where many of you are living. Some of you are going in 2024 and you're deep in probably campaign to ramp up phase right now, but the bulk of you are in pre-campaign phase, and that's what we're going to focus. What can you do to prepare so that should you decide to launch a campaign, you're ready to go? All right, so there's a few things that we can do, and we're going to go into depth on each of these things. The first one is building your planning circle. Who is your team that is going to make sure that you can get this done? The second one is growing your supporters, right? how do you get from the base of people that care about the issue now and are willing to take action on it at the ballot to so many more people that you need to stand with you for political endorsements, for donors, for volunteers? How do you grow that list? The third piece is research, right? What kind of research can we do to actually understand where voters are at, what they care about, what they're willing to pay for, what they're willing to fund, you know, what their concerns are, who they listen to, all of those things. And then the next piece of this is a messaging campaign. We'll talk about like a way that you can actually do a positive C3 oriented public awareness campaign way before a ballot measure. The other thing that we want to focus on today is using 2024 as a learning opportunity. So we'll talk about ways that you can look at what's on the ballot in 2024 and, you know, practice, test, learn in this election cycle. We're also going to talk about getting involved in your local budget process as a way to both build political power, have some wins, and better understand who the players are and what you're advocating for. And then finally, starting to envision the measure. So we'll talk about what that means in terms of revenue sources, research, in terms of understanding what other folks you can learn from other folks who have gone through before. So these are sort of 7 things that you can do now. And the rest of the time, we're going to be diving into each of these. Okay. So starting with why a campaign, right? I want to just get us to kind of step back and think about, we do this because we have a theory of change, right? So as you begin to start to talk to folks, like maybe we're going to do a ballot measure campaign. For many of you, the people who are involved in the child advocacy world are not familiar with working on ballot measures. They may not understand why a ballot measure is the right answer here. And for a lot of other folks that do work in politics, maybe they don't understand why funding for kids, you know, is really critical and really matters right now when there's all these other issues and homelessness and inflation. And, you know, we've got to create that theory of change. And you don't have to know exactly what you're fighting for at the ballot to create a theory of change, right? You don't. You just have to know that you've got goals, and all of your goal, every person on this Zoom, your goal is to increase, you know, improve the lives of children and youth in your communities, right? All of you, to create more equity, to create a better future and better present for all the children and youth in your communities. And it's just sort of big picture goal, right? What are the kind of smaller goals there, right? What are the goals that like you can actually make sure that you're affecting through a ballot measure, and getting specific about what those things are? Maybe it's, you know, getting access to affordable childcare for, you know, 90% of the people in your community, or maybe it's, you know, ensuring that every middle school student has access to after school programs. You know, what are those sort of tangible goals that can happen through the ballot measure that are going to be under the umbrella of that overarching goal of like improving the lives for children and youth and families all across your community? So you want to figure out how you talk about those goals. Again, you don't need to know exactly what the ballot measure is going to do, but you've got to start to be able to articulate a theory of change. And this is going to really help you in the process of developing a potential campaign, because you're going to have to explain to people why the ballot is a right way to go, right? And then what are the strategies and actions needed to accomplish these goals? Why is the ballot a vehicle? You know, what can the ballot do that can't be done every year through budget advocacy, or can't be done with a big grant that you can get, you know, from some kind of a private entity, right? We know the answer to that is that it's stable funding. You know, you can count on it. You oftentimes don't have to go back to the ballot, or if you do, hopefully it's, you know, at least 10, 20 years from then. And what kind of outcomes can you expect to see? Voters are not going to be concerned about the process. They don't really want to know, like, this much money is going to go to this agency, or this new agency is going to be created. That's all jargon to them, to Margaret's point, right? It's like voters are interested in, like, how is this going to change the lives of kids, for my own kids and the kids in our community? Starting to develop that theory of change, talking about why the ballot is important, is something that you can do now, and you should do now, because it's really going to help you do all these other things. All right, now we get into number one thing you can do now around planning circle, right? So
Nicole,
yeah, of course.
interrupt for a second and just really encourage people to put any questions in the chat? That,
Okay, great. And if you could monitor that, Margaret, and like lift them
Yeah.
up, that would be awesome. Just kinda-
I'll stay on top of it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right. So in terms of your planning circle, so what I'm talking about here is who's going to help you decide what this ballot measure looks like and whether or not you're going to move forward, right? So some of you already have some folks, maybe an executive committee that's starting to talk about this. Most of you probably don't, right? Most of you, maybe it's one organization, maybe it's 2 or 3 organizations, maybe it's the first 5 in your community, maybe it is like a couple of folks that are saying, you know, this is an option, or maybe it's an elected official who is presenting this as a possibility. But you want to think about where you want to go, right? Like if you were to launch a ballot measure, let's say in, June of 2025, right? Who should be at that event, right? Who's going to be at that launch event? Who do you want at the table that you can show the diverse support across your community, right? Thinking about how to get those people involved early, we know just all of the work that we've seen on these ballot measures that we win when we have the broadest support possible, and we have lost when we've had funded opposition, right? So how do we minimize that? Doesn't mean that you have to know exactly what you're going for yet, but think about immediately, like, what's it going to take for law enforcement to be supportive of this? Is it possible? What's it going to take for the Chamber of Commerce, or at least be neutral? What's it going to take for the Chamber of Commerce to be supportive, or at least neutral here? Like, start to think about those things at the get-go, right? You also want to make sure you've got multiple perspectives at the table as you're developing these ballot measures. You want someone who understands how politics work in your community, and you also want people who deeply understand what it means to serve children and youth, and understand the policy pieces of this. You also want folks involved who represent your community, right? That look like your community. If you have a really big Latino population, you need to make sure you've got folks representing that at the table immediately, right? If you have a community that is really divided, Democrat, Republican, and you need some independents or even Republicans to win, you've got to have those folks at the table at the beginning, right? So think about what is it going to take, where do you want to go, and how do you get those folks here, right? You want to be conscious about equity and implicit bias. You don't want people just who have done this a million times. You want people who understand what it's going to take to reach impacted communities and to get their voices heard. This is a really good opportunity too, to think about like, what kind of skills are you going to need, right? Once you go to the ballot, how can you use this time period to help build those skills? You know that you're going to have to raise, $500,000 to win a campaign. Who can you get involved now that might have access to that kind of fundraising opportunity? And how can you make sure that the people that are going to be involved in this campaign have better skills, relationships, and insight into how to do that fundraising work? If you know that you're going to have to work hard to get endorsements, of elected officials, of Democratic Party clubs, all those things, how can you build those skills now? Does it make sense to get involved in these political clubs now in this cycle? Like, what can you do so that you're not dealing with all of these big questions that you haven't really had the time to build the skills for? That's something that you can do right now. In terms of getting the right people engaged, some folks to think about, like, who you want to get involved. Obviously, people that have history of leading work on this issue, that's all of you and the folks that you work with, right? But also people that are directly impacted and people that can help you address the questions that you need to put the measure together, right? You can't have a group of 4 people that don't know anything about revenue options, like deciding what revenue option to take, right? You want to have that expertise. This is where like Funding the Next Generation and Margaret and her group of folks can be really helpful. Ed Harrington, who's on this call, is amazing. He's a huge asset in terms of thinking about budgeting and thinking about revenue options. Make sure that you've got those people involved as you're starting to brainstorm. If you really need to get certain folks on board, you have a really popular mayor, or you have like a really, let's say you're living in an area really affected by wildfires and the firefighters are super critical to winning in your community. Are there people that you can get involved that can help you get those folks on board, or at minimum stay neutral, right? And how can we utilize these people at the get-go? The last piece in terms of building your planning circle is like really thinking about how you're going to build your capacity to win, right? You are not, right now, no one is going to be set up to win a ballot measure campaign on their own as an organization, whether you're First Five or you're a nonprofit, but you can get there, right? And how do you get there? Think about like how you're going to start to structure your coalition and organization to work towards this ballot measure, because your structure is probably going to change, right? Like if you're operating on consensus, you know, with 12 people, it's probably not going to work for making tough decisions in a ballot measure campaign. So how can you start to think about now, like what that structure can look like? Strengthening this network of support, right? What we mean by that is like, how do we get other organizations, other companies, other individuals involved that aren't yet at the forefront of fighting for kids and fighting for youth, right? Who are children and youth and that, and get them involved? We want to think about building the political capacity of agencies, right? Part of how we do that is through the budget advocacy work. But be intentional about what else you can do there. Does it make sense to engage in conversations around other ballot measures and how it could impact children and youth? You know, does it make sense to engage in political campaigns? Obviously, you need another entity for that, but like really think about like, how are you going to build that political capital? What relationships do you need to develop now that aren't, it's going to be a lot harder if you've never talked to an elected official and then you go to them 2 years from now, assuming we're on a 3-year timeline, and say, will you support my campaign, right? Our ballot measure. If you've been there for them, if you've helped them on other issues that are maybe more tangentially related, like you've built that relationship, you're going to build that capital. So they're going to be more likely to be there for you when you really need them. And then how do you increase your attention and focus on the larger public, right? That we're not just worried about the families that we're serving directly, but we're thinking about the larger landscape of our communities and how they imagine what is possible for children and youth. And then you want to communicate those successes, right? Any little win you have, because you want to get on people's radar, because you're going to be moving from a situation where you're focused on specifically the children and youth and families you're serving into really focusing on the much larger community and how you want to talk about the ballot measure. All right. Yeah, go ahead. Anything you want to add to that, or any questions or comments on that piece?
Yeah, I wonder if there, I don't know how you'd feel about if anybody who's on this Zoom has some examples from their own experience, some of the things they've done to do the things on your list.
Great.
Because we have some really seasoned people on who
I know.
really interesting things to get this stuff to happen. So if
Totally. I'd love to hear from
if
folks.
anybody's willing, I don't know. I don't seem to have the capacity to look at your screen and look at everybody and the chat. So
Okay, just chime in.
if people would just chime in with
I'll just echo that the coalition building piece and really making sure that we had a diverse team as just a core group as we were first exploring this was really critical. And then sitting down within that and brainstorming out a broader list of who we really need to talk to in the community. So, but just as far as our small committee, so we had me with the business community, and so I've got a lot of that side of relationships, and we had someone who's also a business owner and philanthropist who had a lot of like connections around like how do we talk to those higher level donors, and we had a couple of we had a local elected official who was sort of just an honorary part of the group, but was I think critical too. We had people who serve in that, serve in that sector that could directly give us feedback. So I think that was really helpful just from as we're framing things, but for sure, as we build out that list of who we absolutely need to connect to, who we need to get in front of, and to sort of different messaging to different groups, I think was really, really helpful. So we had a huge spreadsheet, and we just literally we just kept updating that as we talked through like everybody that we needed to hit in our community.
Awesome. Anyone else have anything to say in terms of what you thought, how you're thinking about this, if you're doing it, or what you did to develop it early?
I can share what we did in Sacramento briefly with regard to minimizing the opposition. There were two main things. One, we wanted to try to get the firefighters at least to stay neutral, if not support us. And written into the measure, even before we talked to them, was one of the goals. It was around youth workforce and development. We were well aware that the firefighter and the police departments have cadet academies for younger folks to get them engaged in these careers. So the conversations with the firefighters were about how they could benefit from the measure and how they could expand their career pathways for young people into their profession. The only other thing I'll add, which maybe was unique to our situation, was having our elected officials, so in our case, the mayor and a city council person, be the one to have the conversations. In our situation worked because they have good relationships with the unions. But just caution, not all elected officials, right, have great relationships with those public safety unions.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Claudia. All right, I'm gonna move on. The next thing that you can do now is build your email list. So I'm sure that some of you are always thinking about like how to grow your email list. I will say, I don't think not enough nonprofits think about this, because you're really thinking about it like oftentimes, and what does it mean for my communicating to my, you know, families I'm serving or members right now, and not aspirationally, like, what are we going to need to get to? And like, when we're actually building a campaign, like, we know that one of the biggest currencies that we have is emails, right? Communications, cell phones. I'm saying emails, but it's really your contact list in general, right? Having as many contacts as possible, because you can communicate with these people both indirectly on the issues and then about the campaign. There's absolutely ways of doing that legally and being able to communicate about your campaign once you get there. So you want to use this opportunity now, well before you actually launch a campaign, to build those contacts. So how do you do that? Okay. There's a bunch of different ways you do it. The first way is you got to think about making your email program better, right? All of you have them, but maybe you only email, you know, a couple times a year, but like, how do you get more intentional about making people be more engaged in your email? Because one of the ways you grow your email list is by cultivating the list that you have, right? Getting those people more to pay more attention, to open your emails more, to click on things more. So you want to look at some deliverability best practices of what you can do. Some cool incentives, right? Like the first 10 people to, you know, get someone new to sign up to the email list, you know, get a free ticket to this event that we're doing, right? Or some swag or something. Like incentives can really help grow your list and get people to actually open your emails. Video, you know, a great new video, it can be absolutely grassroots of, you know, something awesome, young people that are doing something really great in the community, showing up and advocating. Like video can really inspire people and get them to open up these emails. Toolkits, right? Where it's like, okay, you're frustrated about, you know, cuts to childcare in our community. Here's what you can do. Not just show up at this event, but like, here is content that we're giving you to post, right? Giving people actual toolkits about how they can very easily participate in your movement. So think about how to make your email program better. We've got some folks at 50+1 who really are experts in this. And so if you are interested in having a conversation about any of these things, like how to grow your list, and have like a focused conversation on it, we can do that and dig in. And we've done that for a few folks and it's been really good. But actually being serious about your email program now. The next thing is partnering with other groups. This is really great. And it's not something I don't think nonprofits take advantage of enough, right? Like you could do a joint action. Okay, maybe, you know, youth homelessness is really on the rise in family homelessness in your community. And there's a housing advocacy organization, and you could do a joint action together and say, we're going to email our entire lists and say, you know, you need to show up at City Hall to make sure that we're fighting for more money for families who are homeless. And they can send it to their list and you can send it to your list and you can say, hey, do you want to participate in this action? Sign up. And then you get to share emails. I have seen this be really successful because you want to be able to access their emails. Sometimes organizations will even do a swap and they'll just share. But more likely than not, you're going to need to do some kind of a joint action where you can collect emails from another organization. You want to do that, okay? Because you are not going to have enough people. Just the people who already care so much about children and youth issues that they're on your email list are not enough to win. So how do you think about expanding it now and having these kinds of joint actions, doing list swaps, opt-in programs? A lot of organizations will be willing to send their list one time and say, hey, maybe like, what can be really good is like sports lists. Like I've seen this before with like youth soccer leagues. They got so many people on their list and they're not going to send out, 10 emails for you, but maybe they do one. They say, all right, you're all on our youth soccer list, but do you want to get active to actually get more recreation programs for children and youth in the community? Sign up with this organization today and you'll get a lot of people to opt in. Even if you get 10 emails, that is free contacts that you've gotten. And oftentimes you can get dozens or even hundreds by doing these things. The next thing is ABC, always be collecting. As we're doing more and more in person, coming out of COVID, we got to get back in the game around contact lists, right? You can do these things on iPads. It's a lot easier now than having those old school sign-in sheets, but you can also use the old school sign-in sheets. But you don't want to be at a rally with 100 people and not get their names or emails or phone numbers, right? Like you gotta invest in that. You gotta think about every time if you have a big Halloween event in your community and there's a whole lot of families around, like what can you do to have an iPad there to collect people's email addresses? Hey, you want to be informed about our advocacy efforts for families in the community? Like this is the opportunity to collect. And then the other piece, final thing here is digital ads. So I could say a ton about this. We could have a whole section about this. I want to acknowledge most of you don't have a lot of money to spend on collecting emails through digital advertising, acquisition ads, but you can actually do quite a bit with not very much money. So and the cool thing about digital ads is you can test it, right? So you could run a petition on Facebook and try to get people to sign up for your email list, whether or not, if it's like, this is the moment and it's back to school time and, all of our kids deserve to have quality, education. We need to invest in, improving the city support to our schools or whatever. See what you get, right? If you spend $500 on digital ads, did you walk away with 50 emails? If you did, that's a good use of $500 because about $10 an email is not bad, right? If you spend $500 and you walk away with 4 emails, okay, you don't need to spend more, but you can test it with a pretty small amount of money and see, are you getting more of these emails? There's also some political organizations that collect emails. Daily Kos is one, and they have their lists and they will send a specific message about your issue and you can collect emails. You have to pay for them, but you can test it. You can say, I only have $1,000 to spend. Let's see what we get. And then decide, do you want to spend more? But you've got to be intentional about this. And it does get a little bit harder legally and just in terms of people's, how they view the measures when you actually get to the ballot. So do it now, right? Grow that list, set ambitious goals. It will help you be more successful. Any comments on this? Has anyone done this and any best practices or thoughts on this? I don't think people are doing it enough, which is partly why we're saying this. But has anyone done it that has anything to share? Christina, it's you coming off mute.
Yeah, no, I was just going to echo. I know through several of our campaigns, we partnered with a lot of CBOs in town, and they took our message and pushed it out through their email lists. And we never asked for theirs. We knew that for some organizations that wouldn't be something they were open to, but they were more than willing to support the cause. And so we formatted it, we prepped it, we had everything, and we must have had at least a dozen organizations across the county saying, we support this, and this is why we think you should as well. And it was enormously helpful, not only through their email lists, but through their social media. And then they had also committed to liking and sharing things as we continued to post. And it just really helped create a lot more awareness for us in a much shorter period of time.
That's awesome. That's great. And, it's like, you could even go further and say, will you do an opt-in for us to see if these people will sign up, right? Because that's hard to do. And they almost certainly will not do it when you're running the campaign. because they'll be concerned about the legal pieces of it, but do it now, doing it sooner before. That's great. All right, anything else on this? All right, we'll move to the third thing you can do now. Oops. There we go. Oh, wait. Sorry, there we go. All right. So the third thing you can do now is the public messaging campaign. So I want to talk about finding opportunities to use research and really think about developing this public messaging. When you get to the campaign, you've really got three different audiences. You've got the people that just need to be educated and aware, and are going to be with you and are going to vote regardless. And then you've got the people you need to persuade that could kind of go either way. Maybe they're really hesitant about taxes. Maybe they're doing quite well. They're not so concerned about their kids and they need to be persuaded why it's really a priority. And then you've got the people that you want to mobilize, like who are with us. But, we know in a presidential year, 24, 26, all these people are going to vote for president, but they skip down ballot, up to 15, 20% of people won't vote for these local ballot measures. And we need these people to win. And then in a midterm year, like 26, right, which if we're thinking about this as 26, a whole lot of people that are going to be with us on the issue that may or may not vote. We're going to have a contested governor's race in California, so that helps a little bit in terms of the top of the ticket, but it's still a real challenge, right? And so we're going to have a lot of people that we've got to try to get to the polls and make sure that they turn out those absentee ballots. So we want to really think about how to use research to find out about these things. Before I get into the messaging components, I want to say a couple things about the research pieces of it. So the research can be expensive, right? Many of you are working with Dave Matz and have done polling or are going to do your own poll.
I just wanted to say a few words about about the messaging, because because there's so many things you can do that don't cost money and don't take a lot of time that becomes so important. If people see your letters to the editor,
Yes.
frequently, if you see you quoted, if you sort of make it your point to get to know the reporter who often writes stories, and you or your allies or your issue gets quoted in the newspaper, you can go meet with editorial boards. There's a lot of things you can do to get attention with your messages that don't cost money, and you should do over time as a matter of course.
100%. And I'll get a little more into those. I think the other piece I want to say about research before we do that is you can get on a poll of someone else, and you should consider that, because a lot of people are going to be polling for 2024. Maybe they're polling about a housing bond. Can you get them to add a question about children or youth to their poll? Most campaigns will do that. If you're basically values aligned, they will do that. And you just have to pay for that question. So instead of paying $45,000 for a poll, maybe you're just paying like $5,000 for a question. So think about that, because 2024, there's going to be tons of polling happening. I will say what you need to do, this is important. Make sure that you can isolate the electorate to be a 2026 electorate. The pollster can do that for you, but you got to say that, because you don't want to know, oh, this is what all these 2024 presidential voters think, and that's going to be a pretty different electorate if you're looking at 2026. But think about adding on to polls. Also, polls that are not electoral related, right? Sometimes cities and counties do polls themselves. You can add a question onto that. All right, so getting into the messaging components, as Margaret mentioned.
Oh, I forgot that was your sorry.
So these are things you could do now, right? Like to her point, that don't cost money. So utilizing the press. So, do you have these relationships already? Can you develop them? What kind of at press events, right? If there's another event that's happening that's on like the economic future of our city, make sure you've got someone there talking about children and youth. Make sure that they then go out to the reporter and have that conversation with them, right? Like you can do an op-ed now highlighting what is at stake and who's not being served. So you get it into the public consciousness. This is hugely important. you want to step back and kind of think about what is your larger narrative. That's why I started with theory of change, because like, what are you trying to accomplish through a ballot measure, and how can you use this pre-time in the press and in communications to be able to share that theory of change, right? And demonstrate right now, like, what's at stake, and communicate that through the press. The other thing that you want to do is kind of be strategic about what and how you communicate online. So, maybe in the past, your emails and your social media has just focused on, this is just what our organization is doing, but you probably want to get a little macro, right? If you're talking about trying to make the case that like, there's just not enough resources for childcare in our communities, you don't want everything just to be about, the fun that you had at the holiday party, or the pumpkin patch. Like, you want to kind of get at what's really at stake for your community, start to sort of alter a little bit about what you're talking about, because you obviously still want to keep highlighting your organization and the positive things that you're doing, but you're going to have to make a case as to why this is really important, right? People see, the drug crisis, people see homelessness, like, they see how their gas prices, like, these are the things they see every single day. They don't need to be reminded about those issues. But sometimes when it comes to inequities in children and youth, they need to know, right? They need to be aware. They may not see it every day. So you've got to get a little more strategic about what you're saying online, what you're communicating, and how. Leverage every opportunity you can, right, to talk about your issue. So to tie it to children and youth, right? If you're at a summit that the mayor's putting on, like, make sure that you get, a speaker that's talking about the state of children and youth. Like, make sure that you're really reimagining opportunities to get in the public consciousness about why your issue matters as much as it does. And then you want to sync your messaging with coalition partners. So what I mean by that is, if you are all, trying to row in the same direction around ultimately getting to a place where, say you've got a ballot measure that's going to fund, 0 to 5, like, how can you make sure that other organizations, be they public entities and or nonprofits, are communicating with the same messaging to be able to get people to understand that there's a real problem here? Try to sync that messaging. Sometimes you can't do it exactly, but you don't want it coming just from one organization. You want people to all of a sudden start to feel like, oh wow, all of a sudden I'm really hearing about this issue, right? Like, think about how the right wing does this. Okay, sorry, I'm working a lot on some issues to protect trans youth right now, and I'm like, man, they really got this going, right? They figured out how we're going to have this ecosystem, creating a sense of fear about trans youth in sports, like it's an actual, massive epidemic. So they're creating something that's not a real problem, and just by repeating, how can we sync our messaging about what the actual problems are and be able to make sure that people start to hear it? Slogans, get it going, like, have messaging that is concise. Okay, anything else that
Can I
people want
ask
to
you a
know about
question?
messaging? Yeah, go ahead.
Because people have spent a lot of money on sort of expensive messaging campaigns, TV ads and so, I mean, the things you talk about, I don't think they have to cost a huge amount of money. Am I right?
You're
Right.
absolutely right. None of this has to cost. Most of it costs nothing. Almost all of this you can do on your own. The only thing that you can pay for is digital ads, but you could have a cool video that someone made and decide you want to put $1,000 behind it, and you want to spread the word about it. Like, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. And I think it's important that we figure out how to do that. And all the things that I just talked about are all free, basically. Anything else that folks want to add in terms of messaging? Okay. All right, so let's move on. The next thing that we can do right now is use 2024 as a learning opportunity. Okay, so we're in election year, it's coming up, right? We're almost there. We are just T-minus 1 year and a week or two. How do we make sure that we're using this as an opportunity? So the one thing I already mentioned was research and polling opportunities. So really be conscious of that, right? If you have an elected official who is running for re-election and they're going to be polling and they're supportive of your issues, ask them if you can pull on this. Also, honestly, it's going to be helpful because it's probably going to show us that it's advantageous for these elected officials to be talking about these issues, right? What are the 501c3 opportunities? You don't have to, you can use C3 funds to pay for polling up until 6 months before an election. So it's really like a huge opportunity to use C3 funds to poll on these issues and to either jump on other people's polls or do your own. 2024.
Sorry, what kind of funds did you say?
501c3.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. The other thing that you can use 2024 for is train and test volunteers. Okay, so I know we need to be careful about candidate work, right? If you're talking about nonprofits, like you're not going to say everybody in our organization is going to, you know, put online, we're all going to go volunteer for this mayoral candidate and, you know, train and test them. But you can as individuals, right? If it's candidate related, and you certainly can as ballot measures. You also can as a GOTV opportunity, right? Maybe you say, you know what, we go in 2026, we know that we're going to have to turn out Black and brown voters in our community because they're not voting at a high enough level in a midterm election, or even more so, we see the huge discrepancy with young voters, right? That often don't vote in midterms. You know what? We know that we're going to have a problem with young voters in 2026. So we're going to focus on GOTV efforts now, right? And use that opportunity to turn out voters, right? And say, we're going to, you know, text everyone in our community between the ages of 18 and 24 and practice now, right? In 2024, it doesn't even have to be tied to a particular campaign, either a candidate or a ballot measure. It can be just about voter turnout. Think about how you can test your volunteers. You know, can you have people that you think are going to be really good leaders say, you know what, let's do one, you know, voter contact event that we're going to do in 2024, where you run, you know, you run a text bank, or you run a canvassing kickoff, or you run, you know, a tabling bonanza all across the city that we're out there encouraging people to vote. You know, you see someone that you think could be a good leader, this is the opportunity to test them. These elections don't come around every month. Sometimes they feel like they do, but they don't. So for, you know, probably not going to be any elections in 2025. So how can you use 2024 to train and test your volunteers? The other thing is build and strengthening relationships. So those relationships that are going to be super critical to winning in 2026, how can you build and strengthen them in 24? Can you guys get involved in, you know, a related measure? Maybe there's a earthquake safety measure that is going to be good for families. That is a huge priority of law enforcement. Can you get involved in that to help build and strengthen those relationships? You know, a little bit of this is opportunistic, and that's okay. You need to be thinking about how you're going to get these people on your side. And then also just how can you expand the network of folks that you know and can go to help you when you're ready for it. And then next thing is play politics. This might not be easy for some of you, but like, you know, do you want to get involved with helping elect on your own time an elected official that you think could be really helpful to a ballot measure campaign? Maybe they're in a tough contested races. You know, do you want to really, you know, go to bat for other folks that you think you're going to need to stand with you? Do you want to get involved in one of these other ballot measures and practice going to Democratic clubs and neighborhood organizations and getting endorsements and building those relationships? Like, think about how to use this opportunity because it's not going to come around again. Anything else that people would add for 2024, like that we can use this as a opportunity? Any other thoughts? Okay. Margaret, anything to add to that?
No, just that it's really important, and something you really support could be on the ballot, particularly in supporting a ballot measure with a colleague that for homelessness, for mental health, for a whole range of issues that are very relevant to families. So I think it's a fabulous idea.
Yeah. Also look at the statewide ballot measures too. You know, they're all still coming into focus to see what it's going to be, but there's going to be housing stuff. There's going to be marriage equality. Like there's going to be a lot of things. How can you kind of work with not just the local ones, but also statewide ones that'll help you develop those relationships that are going to help you get in front of the local entities that need to take a position on those too.
That's a good reminder to me, and to get word out to people, because we're still not sure exactly what the constitutional amendments that are going to be on the ballot, but there could be one that we hate, which is about, expanding how many votes you need to pass revenue measures put on by the so-called taxpayer associations. And there could be one that we really love that will require that if you're going to change the amount of votes needed, and this is an amendment to the Constitution, that has to pass by the same number of votes that you're going to need. So the taxpayers want to make us have 2/3 votes for anything that raises money. We have to be against that. And for the measure the legislature has done, which says you want to pass that, you need a 2/3 vote to pass it. And it's sort of ending this horrible thing where they can pass, things that restrict how much you can vote, and it only takes a majority vote. So, so that will be a really good idea, Nicole, is to sort of get our chops using the 2024 election.
Totally. Yeah. Michelle, did you have something to add?
Hi there. Thanks so much. It was really informative and inspiring. The one thing missing, since I know that you have a campaign firm, is where.
I think you just cut out. Did she cut out for others? Oh, shoot.
Yeah, she cut out from me.
Where in this calendar do you? Oops, and now I'm.
Oh, you're back now. I think you're asking at what
Okay.
point about a campaign consultant. Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Yes.
Not yet, frankly. If it's 2026, not yet. Use me for free through Funding the Next Generation. In terms of you want to spend an hour with me, I have a contract with, I do get paid a little bit, but it's not, but through Funding the Next Generation. So just sign up and spend some time with me and my team. That's what you should be doing now. You shouldn't be paying a campaign consultant if you're thinking about 2026. You want to, and I still have more to get through that we'll talk about, like figuring out what your revenue measure is going to be, what your ballot measure looks like. There's a lot of huge things to figure out, but you don't need to be paying a campaign consultant. I think what you do want to do though is think about who in your community really understands the local ballot measure scene, because I understand that for some communities in the Bay Area, but not deeply for a lot across the state. So somebody really understands it better for your community, but you hopefully don't need to be paying that person anytime soon.
And then thank you. And then while we're doing getting started on many of these things that you mentioned, still to get an idea, like 1 year out, I mean, obviously getting you past 24 elections, but
yeah, it's a good question.
After that?
Yeah, it kind of depends. It depends on how much they're charging you and what that looks like. Sometimes campaign consultants charge by the month, like a monthly retainer, maybe like $10,000 a month or something. If they do that, you don't want to be paying that for 2 years, right? That's way too much of your budget. Sometimes what I do, and I think some other firms do too, is like maybe they'll charge you an amount that's like, let's do the startup package. Like, what do you need to get going? And then maybe you pay $10,000, $15,000 for that. And then they're like, I'll be available if any huge questions come up, but you don't have to pay me for the next 6 months while you're focused on fundraising, and then you need those campaign consultants definitely to do your media, like even, develop your mail, your digital ads, and often to help you create a budget and to help you navigate the political endorsement pieces. But just make sure you're not being taken advantage of in terms of like how long you're paying them and what that looks like. But I would say having someone that you can use as a resource about a year out is probably right.
Great. Okay, so if we get started on our supporters and potential sponsors and all of that, and then check in about maybe a December or January.
Yeah, I think that's
great.
good.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you more, directly about it too in your
Thank
situation. All right, so on to the next section here is we want to get involved in the budget process. So Ed is the expert here, as well as Margaret. They know everything there's to know about this. We will certainly have a session on this, I'm sure, sometime in the next year. But you want to work with the Funding the Next Generation team, with Ed and Margaret and others, to analyze your local budget, right? You want to look at, like, not only where are the opportunities for how you can expand resources to children and youth, but also, like, what is the narrative, and that sort of public awareness campaign that you want to start to tell. Budget process is a great way to involve people because there's something specific that they can do. They can take action by showing up at Board of Supervisors or City Council meetings and advocating. They can make phone calls. They can write letters to the editor. They can write emails to their electeds. They can sit down in meetings with these electeds. Like, they can show their power. You can build your power by getting more people involved. And you can really have real wins. Christina and Stockton has done great stuff on this. A lot of people here have really utilized the budget process to highlight the issues, to have a win, and then to really demonstrate and build more power and capacity as advocates, so that when you do make it to the ballot, you really have built even more of a profile, both within the political insiders and the larger public, if you can do it right. Anything else that you would want to add to that, Margaret, Christina, anyone else, Ed, that has seen this done effectively?
Something just popped up and said it. Low system resources may affect the audio quality. So I need to make sure that I'm not affecting everybody's audio quality. But honestly, this is so important. And you don't have to do anything overly ambitious to say, we want to add $200,000 to the budget for a teen center, or, we just want to keep you from cutting, a measure that is slated for cutting. And people, and you show up once at a budget session with 100 young people and parents, they'll never forget it. So it builds your political power, and it builds the muscle of your network. I can't emphasize too much that this is such an important place to start. And we will do a session on this. We'll do endless sessions on this. And Ed, who's on this call, will help you analyze your budget. And, you just can go and ask questions about the budget and get people starting to see you in the context of money. With the issue of kids.
Awesome. Great. Anything else to add to that, anyone?
Just to emphasize, when we would sit there through budget hearings, and I've sat through I don't know how many budget hearings, when somebody new got up, because we're used to everybody from labor, we're used to certain people always getting up and always talking, I could give their speech. When somebody new got up, or a group of people or kids got up and said something, it's like, everybody turns and listens, because it's real and somebody wants to care about it. It isn't just the normal 25 people who always show up for everything. And so going out there and saying, we have an issue here and you can do something about it, is incredibly powerful. But just to add on to what you're saying there, Nicole.
Great. Thanks, Ed. All right. And then the last thing that you can do now is envision what your measure looks like. So this is really a huge piece of the bulk of content of what you're going to be doing. And you want to really start now in doing this. Again, what's that rationale for the measure? Why do we need a ballot measure? A huge way that people tank these measures is by saying, yes, we know kids are important and we want to do something, but this is not the right way and this is not the right time. They're going to say that. So how can you have that clear rationale about, we need this ballot measure now, and the ballot measure is the way to go? Okay. The second thing is, what do you want to fund? So there's a million directions this could go in. You have to find the right balance here of not deciding this too soon, but not deciding this too late, right? You want to have the right people involved in making this decision. I also seen, though, where ballot measure campaigns that have a real opportunity for success fall apart because they can't get agreement amongst coalition members about what to fund. So, that can't happen in the 11th hour, but take your time to do the due diligence, to be creative about what this could look like before you say, this is only going to after school programs. Because maybe you could find a potential partner. We saw in Oakland, they combined forces with the hospital, because I was also doing a campaign, and then had a lot there in terms of Children's Hospital and Children's Health and other support for children and youth. So is there a way that you could partner with someone else and maybe get a little creative? We know funding these campaigns is really difficult from our community and from child and youth advocates on their own. So, how do you kind of think about what you want to fund? We also had the opposite example of that in Napa, though, where they said, let's put the jail and the kids together. Remember that, Margaret? Because we need a new jail and we need to fund children and youth. And it was at the 11th hour, and it was a really complicated rationale theory of change. I'll tell you, like, putting that mail together was like one of the hardest pieces of mail I think I've ever done. Like, how the heck are we going to combine these two things? So you don't want to just do whatever you need to do to get on the ballot. It was unsuccessful, but you do want to be creative and like take the time to figure out what you want to fund. And part of that is what's winnable, but it's also what's needed, right? What governance and accountability measures are you going to put in place in this measure? You don't have to know exactly how many people are going to be on that commission, where they're going to be coming from, before you launch a ballot measure, but kind of big picture, like who's going to decide where this money goes? Because you don't want to be in a situation when where the Board of Supervisors, City Council has all the power, and all of a sudden, maybe today, you've got a majority that are on your side, but that can change any day. And so how are you developing some accountability measures and governance to ensure that you're going to be able to be successful even if you win, right? And then what's your funding source? This is hard. There's no easy answers here. We do a lot of work and research on this to help figure out what is winnable, what's possible, what are people, what's going to draw enough revenue that it's going to be able to make the impact that you want, what's legal, right? All those things. So I just have across the bottom here, this is where funding the next generation comes into play, right? Margaret and the team here can help you with all 4 of these things and really help you figure this out. It's going to be, you're going to have local knowledge that we don't have about exactly what this looks like in your community, but Margaret and the team has been through this a lot of times and understand like what questions to ask and how to begin to figure out, what we can take off the table and what we need to put on the table.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go through the.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Hello? I'm so sorry. I'm in the car, but I think this is a good time to ask this. We political will right now in regards to potential set-aside dollars for 2026, which is exciting. But also there's not a clarity about how much that is. And so I'm really struggling in this idea of like putting eggs in just one basket. That's not my style, nor does that feel very safe right now. And so trying to like think about and not knowing how much that is and what impact it is based on our theory of change. Is that work that you would help us sort of navigate so we can make decisions based on the impact we're really seeking versus what's available to us? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Margaret, do you want to address that?
She went in and out of my computer, so I'm not sure I understand.
No worries. I think, Ed, did you want to? I bet you have some good thoughts on that. Okay.
I'm sorry, no.
No worries. So I think, Maria, what you're asking is like, you're looking at set aside revenue and you want to help understand like how much money are we talking about that's available?
Yes, we help with that. We're experts in that. We will come to Marin and help you figure that out.
That's what we need, Margaret.
This page, can I just say, this page is like a year of work. This is what, I spend a huge amount of my time on, as does Ed. We will talk in depth about what possible funding sources there are, how you structure a measure, what governance is possible, what are the pros and cons of writing various things in a measure. And this is just up here to say, we're going to start thinking about this now. And there's, a lot of information to back up. You're helping you with each of these squares.
Awesome. All right, we're just about done. I just want to go through just a couple last slides. The other thing is think about who you can learn from, right? There's a lot of people on this call who have worked on ballot measures and they were unsuccessful the first time around and then successful, or they won the first time around, or they're working on it for 2024 and they have a lot to tell you about what they've been doing to prepare. Sit down with these people, talk to them, right? Everybody is going to be willing to give you an hour of their time on Zoom to talk about this, or in person if you can, and ask them, what do you wish you had known at the outset? What were the most important things you did to set up for success? What would you have done differently? Who should I be engaging now? There's no better resource than your peers and the folks that have done this before. And then finally, I'm not going to go through this super in depth, but for those of you that are in San Antonio, we went through this more in depth. Once you get to a place of, are we going to go forward or not? You're going to be asking yourself these questions, right? And like, is your ballot measure going to have the positive impact that you want it to have to make it worth it? Do you have a path to victory in your polling? Can you raise the money that you need to fund your campaign and win? Do you have the people behind you, endorsers and volunteers and donors that you need? Have you done the due diligence and understanding who your opposition could be? What have you done to minimize or stop it? Electoral landscape, what else is on the ballot in 2026? How will it interfere with your measure? And do you have the team that you need to win? You do not need to know the answers to these questions today for 2026 at all, but this can help you kind of step back and think about, okay, how can we take that list of the things that we can do now and go back to that list of things we can do now to prepare us to answer those questions. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. I know we are almost at time. We have 5 more minutes. Margaret, is there anything else that you want to add that I missed? Otherwise, take any other comments or questions.
No, I think it would be great to get other comments and questions. We will have endless things to add at future meetings. People can always call me. I can connect you to Nicole. Ed is sitting ready, willing, and able to help, you understand your local budget. So as there is a lot that we have to offer over the next period of time, so don't panic.
Awesome. Michelle, did you have your hand up? I wasn't sure if that was from before.
Oh, that's from before.
Okay, no worries.
Before, sorry.
Anyone have any other questions or comments?
I guess I have a question. Was this helpful to people?
Very.
Great.
Great. Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. I think, it can be hard to kind of get your head around it as you feel like you're 3 years out. And so hopefully this sort of list of like, here are the 7 things you can do now, and then dig in and figure out what that looks like for your organization, your community, and utilize us as resources, because we're pumped to see a whole lot more on the ballot in 2026, right, Margaret?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, anything else you want to say to close, Margaret?
Well, I'm just thrilled to see people, and I was excited to hear about people thought of the conference, and we're going to have another one. And we're trying to do this on a monthly basis. So stay tuned for our next meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Thank you.